You're listening to XVGM Radio. Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And this is episode 98, Arwing Odyssey with Ro Panuganti. So we have a special guest courtesy of Scarlet Moon, who we've worked with in the past. I can't remember the last time we worked with Scarlet Moon.
I think it was in the early days.
It was.
It was either 5 or 10.
No, it was sometime after that. It was, you know what it was? It was Jeff Ball. We interviewed Jeff Ball for Time Spinner. We are discussing the Arwing Odyssey album that they put out. Respawn Records, I believe, also had a hand in releasing it, possibly through vinyl. Is that right?
Yeah. Hello. First, I guess to start, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about it. Yeah, this album is one of the weirdest ones. I've made too many. This is like number 15. Believe it or not. Respawn Records reached out. They produce vinyl versions of original soundtracks and occasionally cover, remix, kind of arranged soundtracks. And they were like, hey, Star Fox 64, we'd love to have like a rock metal version of that for vinyl. And I was like, okay, that's great. And I just kind of worked it out with them to where I was like, can I just do the digital, do my own release at the same time? And of course they were cool with that. So obviously, vinyls take forever to make, so I dropped the digital last month, and yeah, here we are. It's virtually every Star Fox 64 level theme and or major theme. Sticklers, completely fair. I missed a few tracks off like the multiplayer modes, the jingles and stuff that I couldn't fit onto the vinyl, therefore I could not justify.
Sure.
But otherwise, yeah, this is probably like my most thorough metal album, cover album that I've gotten to do, where every track is kind of there.
Yeah.
I mean, you hit all the big notes, pun intended. And I gotta say, we're only playing. So those who are listening, we are only playing a total of 6 tracks, and that includes the intro this time around. So we have an intro plus 5 other tracks.
Right.
We're gonna play both the original and Ro's version, but these 6 tracks do not cover the breadth of this album. We just kind of picked some of the ones that we wanted to put up or some of our favorites. But if you like Star Fox 64 music, absolutely go check this out because, as you will hear, it's awesome.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
This is a huge jump in terms of musical composition and arrangement between the original Star Fox 64 soundtrack and this arranged Arwing Odyssey album. So I've heard plenty of covers and songs of the past, but not necessarily for Star Fox 64. So it's an interesting take because Star Fox 64 is normally such a orchestral piece of music for the most part. Star Fox's music has changed over the years, where the first 2 games were very much in line with more like rock, pop, hip hop, and even orchestral influences here and there, funk and all different kind of elements of music. And Star Fox 64 was really the first game in the franchise that took a hard orchestral leap and kind of ditched a lot of that more like pop friendly or more rock radio friendly kind of sound in favor of more big and booming movie-esque kind of vibes. So what Ro's done here is taken the original songs and turned them into progressive metal tracks, which is really cool. So if you're into metal and you like Star Fox, I think you'll dig this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. It's high praise, and I feel like it's spot on. The difference between Star Fox Super Nintendo, where most people, including myself, we know because we're into game music, the Corneria and some of the title stuff is. It's very fast. It's, melody first, a lot of repetition. There's short songs that get looped a lot, and they take a different approach. Whereas with Star Fox 64, and I think on every level, they wanted it to feel like very specific movies that, Top Gun and Star Wars combined.
Yeah,
right.
But then dial it back a little bit so that it's accessible to kids. So the music, of course, is I try to use words that are very general or specific to where I'm not mischaracterizing it, but their narrative, they tell stories, they go places, they sound like marches, like you said, orchestral.
Yes. Yeah.
They sound similar to different kinds of scores you might have heard to 70s, 80s movies where like it's a very big difference and it's also larger. So to cover any of this stuff is way harder, which is, my opinion, why you don't see as many Star Fox 64 covers.
That makes sense.
It's a game that's wonderfully recognized as part of, Nintendo history. It's funny, it's fun to play. A lot of people know of it, but to see someone cover Katina, Xanus, I feel like and this is generalizing, of course, but I'm like probably the only person who bothered to cover Bolts because it was part of, Respawn's suggestion. I didn't pick the set list, but, that's kind of just the thing. So, as people listen to it and as we get to listen to it today, especially, and by we, I mean you two, while I kind of lower the volume because it's really hard for me to re-listen to anything I do. It's just a weird, silly music thing, but
I get you.
No, I get that. I'm
excited for the reaction of it all, nonetheless, like to hear your thoughts and to see like how you make these Star Fox 64 tracks that are so big, bombastic orchestra work for a band of what I would say I wanted to keep it like 5 people on stage. That's like my personal take on it. And I know some people like to get every single note of every, of the games, or they feel, they're not meeting the quota or whatever.
Sure.
But,
so
I dumb it down.
The original Star Fox game, the first one, not the 64, was done by Hajime Hirasawa. So that's where a lot of the inspiration for the Star Fox sound kind of initially came from. And then this soundtrack was done by Koji Kondo and Hajime Wakai. So we'll get into them later on in the episode. We've talked about Koji Kondo to death on this show, but we'll talk about Hajime Wakai more specifically and what they've done as well. Let's first talk about this track, and then we'll move into our next one. So we opened up the show with my first pick, which was Corneria. I remember Corneria as the original Star Fox. So I expected that, not having heard Star Fox 64's OST in a very long time. And when it didn't pop up, I was like, wait a minute, did I pick the wrong song?
Of course, yeah.
Man, I gotta say, it's been so long since I've played and listened to Star Fox 64 soundtrack that hearing your version stacked against the original, it's like night and day, in my opinion. It's just, I'm also a metal fan. So like anytime I get to hear like heavy metal versions of songs, like when we've had bands like Lame Genie or
Knights of the Round,
Night of the Round,
those guys.
Like anytime we've had them on, the results are generally the same, where we'll just be like blown away at the rearrangements of these songs, and then we go back and listen to the originals on the episode, and we're just like, man, it just sounds so much weaker, which it's not as slight in any way to the original. The original sounds great for what it is, but it's also a product of the times and a product of limitations.
Oh yeah, the sound chip and everything
for sure.
Else.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed about this one is the original compared with this newer arrangement that Ro has done is the original is so much more militant sounding and marchy than what Ro has kind of produced here, which is a much more like certainly noodlier because of the guitar work, but it's also a lot more like the best word that popped into my head while I was listening to it. It's very cut, like it's very sharp, like things move throughout the song very sharply, and at the same time things flow much better together, whereas the Star Fox 64 original soundtrack, with the limitations of the hardware and everything, is very much like it sounds hollow. As compared to this, it sounds a little bit more dry and a little bit more empty in a lot of ways. Yeah,
there's actually one or two parts in the original N64 track that you can hear the limitations coming in because like the some of the sound drops out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Funny enough, one of the things that I was writing about the original track as we were listening to it, I made a really stupid joke. I called the track horny because there's a lot of horns. But one of the bits that I liked about the original is
so naughty.
Yeah, I know. Trying to keep PG here.
Yeah.
In the original, like you said, it's very militaristic or militant, except for. I don't find the timpani drum to be a military drum, and they use a lot of it. And I really kind of like what they did there because it gave the track a bit of like bass and a bit of gravitas. And then of course you listen to Ro's track, and it's just like it takes that idea of what I like, that, the bass, and it cranks it all the way up.
Yeah.
You got the bass as well as the bass drum, and what you're doing with that makes the low end of this track sound phenomenal.
Yeah, it makes it sound so much more rich.
It does. And I was actually listening originally in earbuds, like what you were listening in. And partway through, I was like, this has to sound different on my headphones. And I put my headphones on, and I'm so glad I did, because I got more of that bass sound.
Yeah.
And I think you really killed it on that.
Thanks.
The timpani sound is much more of I'd say like a sci-fi reference in terms of like Star Wars.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously there's a big Star Wars reference in general too. It's basically Star Wars meets Thunderbirds meets, I don't know, Winnie the Pooh. As far as the anthropomorphic characters, but the sound of the Star Fox 64 soundtrack is very much inspired by what they were doing with the Star Wars movies, and of course with the
prequels.
So right. This actually would have been the re-releases,
the
special editions. Yeah. So those were
93, I think.
I think 97. I think it was like right around that time. 96, 97, or right around there.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Yeah. So
something like that.
Yeah. So Star Wars was kind of big at that point. So it made sense for them to kind of, with the revitalization of Star Wars, to be like, hey, what sounds can we take, to kind of make this much more big and booming sounding instead of just chirpy bass guitars, from the Super NES, little slap bass going on that Hajime Hirasawa was doing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's awesome. But I will say that is the version of the Star Fox sound that I prefer. I prefer the more like
the SNES one.
Yeah, the more SNES, like more popular music inspired type stuff. Not that this is bad. It's just that's just my what I prefer in hearing game music, so to speak.
Just your opinion.
Yeah, for sure. But I really think that this gives us a huge facelift with Ro's tracks.
Well, and especially, so the other thing that I wanted to mention was the opening to this track. I'm gonna make comments that are completely just my assumptions, and if they're wrong, please tell me. But what I got out of the first few seconds of this track was like the perfect start to what I would want out of Star Fox music, because in my head I'm imagining it's the sound of an Arwing starting up and heading out.
Yeah,
Corneria, your first level, it makes sense. So just in my head, it's like whatever that sound is, I feel like you've captured the sound of
it's a jet engine.
Yes.
I love slipping in sound design within a lot of my concept albums, which most of which are Zelda or Metroid or things that are like obvious. But yeah, I wanted it to feel just like your first level when you click off the game.
Yeah. It's
a happy start to an otherwise like contemplative song. So yeah, I put in jet engines, and in maybe just one other song of what we'll listen to today, you might hear a little bit more of like either lasers firing or just like there's a lot of whooshes and booms and stuff, because like it's an album, and I want someone who's never heard of Star Fox or video games or whatever to just listen to it and get a sense of the story, which is something that we're at a humongous disadvantage of in the video game scene. Because if I show someone an album and they're like, nah, I don't like Final Fantasy or something, and but maybe they're a huge metalhead, like they're going to miss out on things
for sure.
So if this is in a mix and it just contextualizes things a bit better, then maybe you'll make a new fan out of Star Fox or Zelda or Metroid or whatever.
And it being progressive metal too, there's a ton of progressive metal albums out there that are like thematic or concept albums. So having that kind of sound effect in something like this really kind of makes it more conceptual in a lot of ways. So
no, I'm glad you caught that.
Yeah. Let's get into our next track. So this is Justin's pick, right?
Yeah. So my first pick here is going to be Katina.
All right, let's hear it.
Welcome back. That was Katina, both from Star Fox 64 as well as Arwing Odyssey, which is what we are here to talk about today.
I like that that guitar, the Spanish guitar.
I was gonna, that was like a big point on mine.
It really changed up the flow of the track and really kind of made that part in particular stand out amongst the rest of it. Not that there was any issues with the rest of it, it all sounded great, but I particularly like that really stood out to me. It like popped. Yeah, it's a nice choice of really making the song sound different than the original.
Yeah, no, 100%. I was listening to the original. I was enjoying the, again, more kind of military snares and timpani and stuff. I noticed a little bit of stereo effects on that one. Like I only heard the timpani in my right or my left ear. So again, I'm assuming that the track that we got is how it came out of the N64, so it's cool that they're playing around with stereo.
Yeah.
And I liked the little breakdown in the middle. And then so, when we listen to the Arwing Odyssey version, it very much feels like almost like a shot-for-shot remake of the original, but in the metal style, which I like because I really like this track and I really like the melody of this track. You didn't deviate a whole lot other than the fact that you, like I said, made it metal. But then you get to that breakdown, and I was curious. I'm like, I wonder what he's going to do for the breakdown. Like Mike said, that Spanish guitar in there, I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I feel like not only did you kind of like beef up the original track, but the little changes really, really did stand out.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a few cool things with this one, and I feel like this is a good way to like kind of introduce a point to this album that makes it so unique, even though in some perspectives I view it as like a con or maybe like a challenge. But given that the album was written or rather arranged for vinyl, it meant humongous differences in how I approach everything. Normally, if you listen to anything I've done from like Ocarina of Time or like Breath of the Wild, Metroid, all of those albums are like expansive and lengthy, and they vastly differentiate from the originals. Whereas with this one, because there was a time kind of crunch, you can only fit so much on vinyl, or so or so I've been told.
Yeah.
So I had to stick really close to the original. So a lot of our, we call it like bag of tricks, is how do you make the original video game song work kind of like a rock song, where you have solos, choruses, and things. So on the repeat, I was like, well, it's going to be boring if they just hear again, the same way. Or at least, someone who does prog music, and like to me, I've got to change it up. So I wanted to have like this softer feeling to it, which is honestly like how it felt when you got back up and you see Bill in Katina. It's a cheerful battle to me. It's not like this devastating horrorscape like Venom is. So I was like, all right, let's make some like nice open area acoustic, and then just to play around, let's add a solo. And when you're playing acoustic guitars at like that speed, the most obvious influence that comes to mind is a little bit of like, Spanish guitarra style, or even like some of the guitar I practiced for like mariachi style, where you're playing with like, common like scales that are used all over, but we associate that with like Spanish dance music, and it's just a fun addition to make this little constraint work for Katina.
You could have called it Friday Night in Katina.
Friday Night in Katina.
Yeah, reference to Friday Night in San Francisco. One of the best Spanish guitar albums ever made. It's got John McLaughlin, Paco de Lucia, and Al Di Meola. Like phenomenal guitarists, and they do this like amazing Spanish. Yeah, they do this amazing Spanish guitar album that's just incredible. It's like some of the best Spanish guitar you'll ever hear. So, and it's all done in front of a live studio or a live audience or whatever. A live studio audience, live audience. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's like one of my favorite albums of all time. So yeah, go check.
One of the benefits of progressive music to begin with is like the diversity of your instrumentation and styles and influences is like expected and encouraged. Like there really isn't like a gatekeeping, because like there's no gate. It's just so like I wanted to have like, hey, let's get like one track on here where there's acoustic guitar, one track on here where it's like a lot of clean guitar and just a little bit of metal, which that's another song we're going to get to listen to today. And like when I think to Katina, I think that was the track that was supposed to, or that hopefully like functions as the acoustic mix kind of song, the happy battle music. No battle, I guess, is really happy, but it feels like you have a chance.
It's got those uplifting, like, dun 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 dun, like, it's very, like,
there's
uplifting.
2 major chords in the chorus, but it's cool. And, like, if you play through the game, or if you're listening and you've played through Star Fox a lot, you know that sequence is where Fox and the team, like, they meet Bill, who's a dog, he's a friend, and I didn't realize this, but yeah, like, the level is kind of based on Independence Day, which, with respect, is kind of also like a campy, fun type of sci-fi adventure. Much, Top Gun, but with aliens or something.
Yeah, doesn't Bill fly up into the...
Bill Paxton.
Yeah, but his name is Bill.
Oh my god.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
That is funny.
Yeah. So it's like directly Independence Day. You got the...
I may have looked that up.
The what's it called? The spaceship, the cylinder...
Mothership,
the mothership thing. It's called the Saucerer, I believe, with roads jutting out from all 4, like, areas. The militant aspects of this one too really kind of shine through. Not just that da 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 da, but it's
like a march percussion. Which,
it's got a real twinkle to it too. Like I could have sworn that I heard a triangle in there in the original. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It's a cool track. Both the original and the rearranged, and it's very uplifting. So it's
also important, I think, like with metal albums, and this was a huge problem I had up until the end. A lot of people talk about like song flow, and I like making these video game albums where you start at the beginning, right? And you end with final boss credits or like something that feels like it ends on a good note.
Rising action, falling action, right.
Yeah, and you lose that if all of your songs are just minor and like evil only and no redemption. So like Katina on the first side of the album, so to speak, is like one of those songs that kind of helps you bring back, and I wanted to make sure there would be some lightness and also like not so much like heavy gent big guitars. I wanted the balance. And one track, the last track basically, the ultimate Andros fight, it almost ended on like a sour note, and I'm like, someone's gonna turn off their like the album or their CD or vinyl and be like, well, I feel sad. A giant floating monkey face like kills Fox. Like that's what the music said.
Right.
So even then, like if you listen to it, I end up like ending it with the ba-da-da, ba-da-ba reference and like a little bit of voice acting from me from like Fox's dad's voice. And I could not end an album on a sad note. That's just, it doesn't work.
Should have made him say, hello, fair. Papa.
I mean, Terminal Montage and that whole cartoon definitely stuck in my head.
Yeah. It's hard to separate the Terminal Montage video
Bill,
from...
you are my best friend.
Yeah.
Which is what I thought of when I showed my friend Katina and he was just talking about Terminal Montage.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't seen it, go check out Terminal Montage on YouTube. The sound can get very loud on the videos, so just forewarned. But they're hilarious. All of that stuff is great. But he does a Star Fox 64 video, and it's incredible. So funny. So let's get into the next track, and then we'll ask Ro some more questions about it. This is Star Wolf. I'm excited for this one.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
welcome back to XVGM Radio. We're in the hot seat with, well,
Ro's in the hot seat.
Ro's in the hot seat, yeah. I was going to say, well, we're kind of in the hot seat too, because we got to come up with stuff to say about this without being, flustered. And I don't know. This is a particularly difficult episode for me because I'm like listening to these originals and I'm like, they just feel it's to the point where like you're more the note taker. Whereas I'll kind of more flow off of like what I just heard. But because I'm hearing two tracks back to back, I have to remember what I heard in the original. And because I'm so not as familiar with Star Fox 64 as I am with like the original Star Fox soundtrack, I had to like break out my phone and like write notes.
That's the entire reason that I take notes is because I have that, but worse.
Yeah.
We listen to a song and then within 2 minutes of us talking, I've forgotten everything.
So what I could say about the original, it's very much like a Latin vibe to that track. I love the pitter patter of the snare rolls there, like but also there's a really great setup for a metal song, coincidentally, with those like stabby kind of chuggy strings in the beginning with the digga 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 digga. I feel like the metal version it was such a good setup for Ro to come in and be like, I'm gonna yoink that and put it in my version. But comparing it with Ro's version, you've got an almost flamenco sound during the breakdown parts, and initially it was very much like sprinkled in. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I was like, was that flamenco? And then it comes back much stronger a little bit later in the track. And I was like, oh, yes, it was. So that was cool. And I also really loved the call and answer bits with the guitars. And of course, that solo is like all new. Obviously there was no solo in the original.
Wait,
so
what?
Yeah, right. There's no guitar solo in the original. So it was cool to see a little bit more embellishment of metal in this track, more so than the other two that we've heard, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. It's funny. I know you said flamenco, but my brain said flamingo, and then I went, oh man, wouldn't it be funny if the Star Wolf version of Falco was a flamingo?
Okay, I could see that. Yeah, a pink flamingo.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like an eye patch.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, if you're going to be a bad guy and you're going to be a bird, you got to have an eye patch.
I guess.
For some reason.
I wonder what his voice would sound like. Because, I mean, like, all the voices in Star Fox 64 are all, like, they've all been kind of memed a little bit in a way,
Aren't they still the nonsense speak?
No.
Oh,
they're voice acted.
This is the first game in the series where they were actual voice acting. They weren't like,
do a barrel roll and all this.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Shouts.
There was no more dubba-doo-dubba,
Wing damage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, now they have like actual voices, which is cool.
Right.
Which fits in with the later games. Really the only game that did that afterwards with the dubba-doo-dubba was Star Fox Command. And what was cool about that one was you could record your own voice. It was oh, you don't remember that? Yeah, it was super cool. Like they would ask you a bunch of questions and then you press the microphone button and you say the answers. Like they'd be like, "What's your favorite sandwich?" or whatever, and you'd be like, "Peanut butter and jelly" or something. And then they put in a bunch of random questions, if I recall. And once you answer all the questions, they take your answers and then they garble them up. So when you hear some of the characters speak, they'd be all like, dubba-doo-dubba. So that's the only one that I remember from Star Fox, the original.
Yeah.
Was when Falco would pop in, he'd be like, dubba-doo-dubba.
I think that was Slippy.
Was it Slippy?
Falco, I always used to think he was saying, what wing damage.
No, I don't think
so. Wing damage. And then Slippy was dubba-doo-dubba.
I honestly haven't played the Super Nintendo Star Fox more than I think once. So I'm impressed. That was like the end of the SNES life cycle, I think.
Yeah.
And I started gaming just a little bit before that. So.
I would say the one I have most experience with would probably be Star Fox 2. I think I've played that the most out of any of them, which is weird because it came out because it's the newest. Yeah. This
I actually played that one as well for like 10 or 20 minutes. I was underwhelmed because I hadn't played much of the first one.
It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
I love Star Fox 2. It's so much fun.
I can see so much resemblance in the later games, though.
Oh, for sure. Especially the newest game, the Star Fox Zero. They literally took the chicken walker from it. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's right.
But anyways,
getting back to the music a little bit. So for the original track, even before we got to the metal version, I felt that the N64 version was a little weak, partly because like the synth organ that they were using didn't really feel right to me. I don't know, something about it just kind of felt weak, and the track itself felt a little bit empty. And I put a little snarky note. I said the track feels a little bit more empty than the others, perhaps because Wolf's soul is empty. But yeah, it
can't let you do that, Justin.
Yeah, right. But I don't think it's a bad track, and by far it's definitely not the worst track on the original N64 album.
Oh, this is like one of my favorites on the Star Fox 64 album.
Yeah, no, it is good in context, but like I knew something better was coming, and it was. I feel like Ro's version kind of gave the original teeth. I feel like it's a bit more menacing.
Sure.
I thought it was appropriately aggressive for Star Wolf and what the Star Wolf team is for.
Yeah.
That was kind of my biggest takeaway, is we went from this track that I kind of thought was a little on the weak side to something and didn't really fit the menace of Star Wolf. And then we got the metal version that was like, yeah, no, I don't want to mess with them.
Well, the thing that I would say is this could have been even more menacing, in my opinion. Like, I feel like if any of the songs on this soundtrack could have been metal, it would be this track. For sure. Just especially with those kind of stabby guitars, the shreddy kind of digga. That right there, I mean, I feel like there's so many different ways that any artist who's working on a remix of this could, reinterpret it or cover it or whatever. It just opens up so much room. You can go thrash with it. You can go gent with it. You can go progressive metal. You can go progressive death. There's just so much room for interpretation. Probably the only thing you probably couldn't do is like doom metal. I can't picture doom metal because it's too shreddy. Or
sludge metal, yeah.
Yeah. So I think this was a good fit, and the way you interpreted it was right for what it was. But at the same time, like, man, I kind of wanted a little bit more gent. Like, if you were to redo it, and this
if
is
I had
just
more time.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that, or like even if like you were thinking about ever reworking it or something like that, like putting in maybe a little bit more breathing room and then adding in a little bit more gent would like be. I feel like it would open up the track to maybe pause for a second and just let it groove. Even groove metal too. Groove metal could have fit in really well with this too. Even so, it's still like so far this is my favorite, which is no surprise because Star Wolf's track is my favorite. So.
Yeah.
People who remember Star Fox 64 a normal amount, like not the remixer life where you have to know every song ever made. People know this one. People know Star Wolf. Super Smash Brothers players know it well.
Yes.
And the remix version of Star Wolf on, I believe, Raw onwards, actually did lean a little bit more into Latin, different music styles. Trumpet, that's kind of singing high. They've got like nylon stringed, Spanish style guitars going. So knowing all of that, I always wanted to cover it, and I actually performed with the Mariachi Entertainment System band at MagFest
that's awesome.
2020, and it was a wonderful honor. I had to learn a lot of Spanish nylon style guitar for them, but we played Star Wolf, and during the breaks, David Ortiz, the kind of band leader trumpeter, was like, what if you just did like some guitar solos during then and kept going and going and going until I look all like upset, and then I'll cue you and we'll go back to the da 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 da. So I loved that, and I wanted to put that back as like a little thank you nod. So what you're hearing is like me playing acoustic guitar. It's not quite like flamenco with, my hands, but it's close enough. It's tapping and like doing little noodles. So, that's kind of what the special part of this arrangement was to me. It's super fast. Like you said, it's got this percussive, fast, galloping triplets. It just screams kind of metal. But again, the plague of fitting everything into a disc
Yep.
I would love to have like a longer version for like live, and we actually got to play this one live as well at MagFest. And yeah, it's just this frantic, fast battle with soaring melodies, constantly changing chords. You feel like you're really being thrown for a loop like a dogfight. And the reason why I think it also sounds beefy is this album is largely recorded on 8-string guitar. So, you know, like some of the lowest notes you hear in the song is like an F. And on my guitar, I tuned down to drop E, which is, you know, one octave lower.
Okay.
Therefore, it's one octave bassier. Therefore, on paper, it should be even heavier than before. But yeah, this was the one song like I knew I was gonna have to put out a video for, and kind of like people love Starwolf. And I think he's a fun, cheesy villain, and the world can always use more cheesy, you know, campy villains like that. So.
Yeah,
for sure.
100%.
All right, let's get into your next pick. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so next up we are going to listen to the track titled Zonus.
All right, let's hear it.
Welcome back, dear listeners. That was Zone S from Star Fox 64, as well as the Arwing Odyssey version by our guest today, Ro. So I picked this one to play because it's, a little on the slower side, a little on the softer side. Mm-hmm. The original track on the N64 feels like, I don't want to say like a
Top Gun.
Yeah, I mean a little bit. I don't really want to say Jekyll and Hyde because it's not that drastic, but like there's kind of two parts to the song. There's like the opening or the beginning part, which is very kind of twinkly. It reminds me almost of something Gradius-esque. And then there's the opposite side to that where you've got this kind of soaring melody and it's more sci-fi space opera to me. I enjoy the original track for just what it is. And then we heard the metal version. And as has been happening a lot, it kind of kicks it up to another level. The first thing that I've got to ask is, so the twinkling melody that I was talking about in the original track, obviously you still have that here because it starts out the whole thing, but you kind of quickly come in with some other stuff. And I feel like I'm hearing some kind of a filter or something on the guitars that are playing that, but it's so quick I couldn't really pick up on it. So I'm not sure if it's just the way that it's mixed or if it really is a filter that I'm hearing.
I'm trying to remember, actually, but I think what likely happened, I love the opening line, so I definitely put it as a synth. And then I played it on guitar by tapping, but I muted my strings as much as I could, and I put up the noise gate. So, like, what you're hearing is the blend, no filters, surprisingly. And it's just, like, muted in such a way that, like, when you tap on a guitar, but you don't have that much like processes or reverb or anything, it really does have like this kind of synthesized inorganic vibe to it.
I'll tell you, it does sound really cool. Like I said, I heard it and I was like, oh, what is that? And then it kind of just, it went into the rest of part of the song. And I was a little bit lost, not like in a bad way, just like, oh, I want more of that. And then I kind of got more of that at the end. Like, I think the best kind of way to describe the metal version of the song, because I don't feel like the original is very much like a ballad, but like what you have here feels very much like a metal ballad to me.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think I use the word ballad quite liberally as well, because you know what I think of this one, and I think I told my wife this, is Zonas, or at least my version of Zonas, is night driving, where you're kind of relaxed. And yeah, not everything is like happy or scary. It's more complex than that. So, and if you play the level, you're flying over like a swampy planet. It's not exactly night driving, but it's got like this determination about it.
The original has these very like dreamy 80s keyboards in the beginning that give it a much more like Top Gun kind of vibe. And then it's got a very serious tone, almost as like a we won, but at what cost? Kind of vibes.
Sure.
And the drums are like initially very soft on the original and kind of kick up as the track kind of progresses. But your metal version here has a lot more going on with the drums. Like, for sure, that was the thing that really stood out to me initially, along with the sped up tempo. Like, night and day as far as that stuff goes. There was way more chuggy guitar in this version than in some of the previous tracks, but then you've got some really cool dual harmonizing guitars with a lower octave, which I am a sucker for, so I always love that stuff. And then the keyboards kind of gently pop in along with like the acoustic guitar, but I feel like they should have been a bigger part of the track overall to kind of match. Like, they just pop in like, hey, we're still here, okay, see ya, just to give the track a little bit more like additional variety, which is cool. But I definitely wanted more of that like throughout the entire thing, just so it kind of vibes with the more dreamy aspects of the original. I love that ending with the echoing guitar. That's, I think, a pedal effect, right?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember at this point, but I operate all of my recording actually normally through either an Axe-Fx, which is like a rack amplifier unit, for those listening not familiar, but there was something important about having like delay and just giving off more of that. I'm extremely agnostic, and I think I said this too earlier when it comes to the originals. Like, if I completely go the opposite direction, I feel nothing.
Oh, it's all good, though. I mean, it's an interpretation of it. It's not supposed to be a word-for-word translation, right. So that totally is fine.
I love that you caught the 80s synthiness of the keyboards, because one element that I do value a lot is kind of like, like before a painter paints, I guess they like pick out their colors or whatever. And for me, I'm like, all right, what will I do and what won't I do? And I love 80s music,
Same.
80s heavy metal and 80s prog metal and progressive rock, your Dream Theaters, and even things like Journey. I find them to have like those really soft, sweet kind of ballads and
Sure.
So part of that, as you pointed out, is like, what keyboards could I use to like enhance the feelings that I'm hoping for, which if I work on more piano playing, I would love to feature more synthesizers. One of the reasons why I kind of like put them to chord duty often is while I started on piano, I do not have like the same skill set as I do on guitar. And a lot of what I've kind of been searching is like, what should I do for the album that presents my best? And then what can support that? Which is, the reason why a lot of people go with like programming drums, for example, like samples instead of hiring a drummer or trying to play themselves.
Sure. What is your musical background as far as like how you got started with music and everything?
I was maybe 4 or 5 years old when I started taking piano lessons because my sister did, and she got a lot of attention. And I was like, I need that. My folks are from India, so we grew up listening to a ton of British music. Everything from like the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin. My dad loved classic rock. I always had rock music in the house, but I definitely had like 0 role models or family members doing like music actively. So, piano lessons that came, I was learning a lot of like, piano lesson music. And at the time, there wasn't enough internet to be like, hey, want to learn how to play the Pokemon theme or so on?
Right.
So, long story short, I flipped through like trumpet in school for a bit, and I ended up liking the idea of guitar because I went to summer camp. So in 2007, I picked up electric. I ended up like trying to play as much as I could. So I practiced like 3-4 hours like crazy every day, which is insane because up until like junior year, I guess my workload wasn't that bad. And then I still was practicing, but I was taking all the school load. I did the high school band thing. And what got me into video game music afterwards was I realized like no one around me likes metal. No one around me is quite like as eager to make music of some sort. And I ended up going to the internet and I found like 1 or 2 people who made covers of Banjo-Kazooie music. And I was like, you can do that? Like people make this?
So Justin and I came from very similar backgrounds in terms of our VGM, where we both started out as like, we liked all of the game soundtracks, the original soundtracks, but then we ended up finding OC Remix and kind of, that's kind of how we approached the VGM community in that aspect, as far as like covers and rearrangements and remixes and stuff like that. We came from like a different generation almost in a way, because like YouTube wasn't really where we went for remixes initially. It's more like we went to OC Remix.
No, yeah, to your point. I mean, like, this is like one of the hugest communities, and obviously like OCR is one of the oldest.
Sure.
So my start was like 2011 or 12. And, eventually by 2014 or so, I was making covers every week. I didn't care if they sounded good, were in tune. I used a different silly alias, like I didn't take myself seriously. And that was the coinciding of me being like a high school kid. And by the time it was 2017, I was working with the community at the time of Materia Collective and releasing I was going to start releasing my own album. So I went under Ro Panuganti, and that was when I put out, I guess, like my 7th album, The Wild, from Breath of the Wild, which was, by my measurement, like a humongous success for me. So I was like, screw it, going by Ro Panuganti. And since then, I learned bass guitar. I started taking like voice lessons. I collaborated with a lot of people. I founded the Multiplayer Charity, which was one of the first kind of video game music charity albums around. And then I worked with founding the Pixel Mixers group, which is another like a very large community of like a large range of people, especially like newcomers. Now I'm working with game groups very often. And of course, I just got like 11 years of YouTube covers, and a lot of my stuff is like, music videos, elaborate of tributes to games. So that's kind of like where I've come musically. Obviously now this year, we've got Arwing Odyssey out, and I started a second project for my like Indian influenced music called Game Raga as well, and that's where I've been, like self-teaching myself a bit of sitar and some tabla, and kind of like bringing out a little bit of my heritage into my like rock and metal arrangements as well.
Awesome. That's cool.
That's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, let's get into our next pick. This is my final pick. Oh, yeah. And I went with Aquas. So let's check this one out. the hits.
Something's wrong with the G diffuser.
All the bits.
Do a barrel roll.
XVGM Radio. All right, that was my final pick of this episode. Aquas is the name of the level and also the name of the remixed or covered version off of Arwing Odyssey from our guest of honor. I gotta say, this one feels the most different from the original. The original has these dampened timpanis in the beginning, and then the choir kind of comes in with these very like twinkling synths. So it's very like crystalline, very like watery, and that makes sense because it's a water-based level. You're in the submarine. So it makes sense that this is like a very like serene, kind of calming song in the original. And then that main melody kicks in and it really kind of lifts the track back up before it settles back into the choir and the drums. But there's also like this really subtle bass line that's kind of floating in the background during that time. But what I notice is that in Ro's version, the guitar melody from the middle of the track is actually like front and center for a good chunk of that wow, na, 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 na. So basically it sounds like what you did was you took that and moved it to the front of the track. Plus I really love that delayed guitar in there too. That was really cool. And I like that it wasn't like front and center. You really let that main melody play out with the twinkling kind of echoey guitar more in the background. And then I really like the absence of drums in the beginning. There really wasn't much drum work in Ro's version initially, which kind of fits with the, original in that sense. But then, man, those drums come in, they really kick it up a notch. And then, you've got a little bit more guitar work going throughout the rest of the track there, more towards like the middle to the end-ish. And so it just, to me at least, it felt very different and very rearranged from the original, which is cool. It's different, and I think it was all smart decisions. It'd be like covering aquatic ambiance from Donkey Kong Country. Doing a metal version of that is going to be very difficult because it's a very calming, serene, kind of chill track. So I think the decisions that were made here were overall like for the best.
I agree. It's funny because I don't remember this level. I may not have played this level when
it's in the middle. It's in the path on the left, if I recall.
Yeah, there's different paths, of course, to the game. So, like growing up, you can only hit so many.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, not remembering it doesn't mean anything to me other than like either I've only played it once or I just never went in the direction that this planet existed. Listening to this, I got like very ethereal, and the way that the original track was structured, I did get water level, but I was just like, I mean, it's a spaceship game. You're not underwater. What are you talking about? So,
there's no spaceships underwater.
From the opening of it, like very ethereal. I liked how the percussion was like the echo there, and like that's kind of that, and like the subtle other sounds and instruments that were integrated for all of like a few seconds here and there kind of gave me this water vibe, specifically the percussion, because what it was doing, the way that it was echoing reminded me kind of like the rippling of water. Bringing that into the metal version, like Mike said, there wasn't as much drum work in the beginning, but it wasn't needed because what you did is you picked up what was going on with the drums and you put it into the guitars, and it sounded way cooler. I do like what was done with the drums in the original, but I think it sounds better coming from the guitars, the way you have that delay and that echo.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Aquas is a really unique level and a very unique song. And earlier I was talking about like kind of the function of some songs on the album. Like, I've got to have an acoustic one. I've got to have a blank. This was the I've got to have a clean song. Or at least a song that, if you're familiar with the band The Contortionist, incredible progressive metal band, but one of their songs that if you go listen to it now, you're going to be like, oh my God, Ro just ripped off Language. But Language starts with this triplet delay clean guitar, which is what you kind of hear with that arpeggio going on, that and it sets you up for softer texture, which, yes, I think that's like the water that both of you kind of spoke about. And when it comes to like the introduction of percussion, I feel like going in with something kind of creative, not standard drum kit, snare hits, but hitting like the rims, which is what you're hearing early on, is kind of like this nice subtle way to create like a nature feeling where sounds are just kind of popping up. So that was like really important for me to get, the entire arrangement going. From there, all the guitars have like way less distortion going on. You kind of hear like almost like a vocal vibe is what I was hoping for. Another artist that's fairly popular in progressive rock is Pliny, Australian guitar player with a lot of like kind of softer textured rock, and like the lead guitar takes off a lot of that. And then of course you have layers of synths, and during the chorus especially you get like the full blast of rock, but there's still like synthesizers and choirs and things that are important, I think, to keep the overall texture of the song unique. And especially as the ending to part 1 of the album. This is side A. So I really wanted to end with something that would be unique, and that's really how Aqueous kind of became like this great pivot track where it's like, all right, this album has a lot of rock and hard hits and fast, chuggy, like, but we're also going to like, take you places. And if I'm honest, this is probably where I was like, I need to get more creative with these arrangements because I want to have more fun. Yeah. So like, once you get to the next side of the album, which I know we're going to talk about a track from there, you start hearing like kind of wackier and wackier stuff, more instrumentation, and immediately the next song on the album, Sector X, is like an orchestra first song. Like you don't even get guitars until the end. So yeah, it's all kind of intentional for the little Star Fox story, but it comes back to what feels like a unique kind of texture.
Yeah, this is such a small sample of what you've included in the soundtrack, so it's difficult for us to showcase the full effect of what you were trying to go for. So I'm curious, how difficult was it to fit the music into a vinyl production? Was it difficult for you to kind of fit like a quote unquote side A and side B vinyl production in? And do you think that that's something in the musical industry that makes things kind of return to form, like a more form-fitting kind of vibe for music these days?
Ooh. So I think you asked two extremely important questions here. The first one, of course, this is the hardest album I've ever made, purely from those aspects. Yes. Yeah. I was given songs to cover, in that regard, which I wouldn't have maybe originally thought to cover. Bulls or Titanium Macbeth is another one that's like, oh yeah, I love the level, and I'm happy I got to add like train noises and stuff. But
I almost picked that one.
Yeah, it's like,
it's a cool level.
It's not that the music's inherently bad, and as I mentioned, like I remove myself from the originals in terms of like, I gotta like improve upon this or improve this. I care about it for sure, but
you gotta do your own thing.
I just want to make good metal, and I love video games, and sometimes those two values cross over, and some people will not love that, and that's cool. But yeah, so it was hard to pick that. And not only that, but as you mentioned in your second question, is I couldn't make all of the songs as long as I want. Aqueous is a song that deserves, it could be 5 minutes. Yeah. And, I could have a singer on here, and, you could do so many things with that. Sure. But with the restriction, it does tighten the arrangement. And it also does make side A and B, I feel like they take on little lives of their own, where side A is kind of like Star Fox 64, the hits. And side B is like art rock Star Fox ending with like extremely grungy, brutal breakdown voice acting thing. It's challenging, whereas with the last album I did before Arwing Odyssey was based on the game Undertale. I had free reign. It wasn't meant to be on vinyl. Yeah. So it's 24 tracks. Some of the songs are like 4 or 5 minutes. It gets very experimental because you feel less risk. But the downside is if you make an album like 80 minutes, someone's going to listen, but you have to really justify that time. Sure. And that's something that we don't have that problem in Arwing Odyssey. It's shorter. It's form factor. It's different that way. So I don't know if I would do things again for vinyl this way. Like if I had an album that accidentally fit, like totally. Sure. But it's pretty challenging. And I don't know other musicians in the scene who have done things that way, where they were handed a list of songs from a game to cover, whether they liked them or not, and the song lengths that they have to be to fit on this vinyl. So yeah, it's a really interesting process. I don't know if it's my favorite kind, but it definitely yielded some interesting results. And I do appreciate how a lot of the tracks ended up just being like tighter.
I think it's interesting these days for musicians in general they have to kind of go back to the way that we used to do music. Beforehand, you would have CDs. You'd just be like, oh, well, let's just make another CD. But for an artist who's wanting to sell records, they have to be more mindful of it because records cost way more money and they take way longer to make than a CD. And the mastering process is different. Like, it's just a completely different beast. So for musicians nowadays, I almost feel like it really makes musicians kind of second guess what they're doing because they got to be like, okay, we could do like a 30-minute opus for the first half of the album. Like, it's in separating music into side A, side B again. You know, we had that on cassettes, we had that on vinyl, but we lost that on CDs. And even though the CDs were around since the 80s, you know, but like with vinyl and with cassette, there was just such a different vibe that you would get. And it would also create limitations that musicians had to think of. All right, Justin, your final pick of the evening. What do you got?
All right, so we're going to wrap this up with first the Star Fox 64 version called Boss Battle C, and then the Arwing Odyssey version called Boss Battle 3. All right, welcome back, everyone. That is the last track of this episode 98. So we heard Boss Battle C from the original Star Fox 64, and then we heard Boss Battle 3 from Ro's Arwing Odyssey album. Oh man. So I wanted to get something Like, not that we didn't have enough up-tempo, in-your-face music, but boss battles tend to be a different type of that.
True.
So
yeah.
I wanted to get something that sounded kind of in-your-face, both from the N64 as well as out of the metal scene. And I gotta say, I do like both of these for different reasons. I mean, the Boss Battle C, to me, feels like one of the more fully sounding N64 tracks that we've played. Like Corneria 2, the stuff that we've had on this episode has been, up and down all over the place in very good ways. But I very much enjoyed Boss Battle C. And once again, Boss Battle 3, your version of it just kicks it right up. I love the squeedlies and the meedlies in the middle, the solo. Honestly, I think the metal solos that you've added are really kind of what make it, because you've taken this thing and kind of ramped up the aggressiveness of something that's already really aggressive, and then not only did you make it your own, you kind of added this special thing you're not really going to get anywhere else.
Yeah, but it wasn't too like showboaty. A lot of the times with
Okay.
Meaning, what I mean by that is a lot of progressive metal guitarists, when they do solos, like I'm specifically thinking of Dream Theater, they'll they get super wanky and just like, it's more about showing off than getting something out that kind of speaks to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And I feel like with the solos that we're hearing on this record, it's very much to the point. And it adds a lot, but at the same time, it doesn't like overstep its boundaries, because there are no solos in the original Star Fox 64. Right. So Ro's adding them in, but he's doing it in a way that doesn't make it overbearing. That's what I'm trying to say. But the intense back and forth string section of the original was really cool, and I felt like it was like a sinking ship in a way.
Yeah.
I also feel like there's a lot more like watery kind of vibes too with that, like like there's so much more back and forth than on the metal version in that aspect. So to me, that felt a little bit more cinematic than Ro's version. There's minimal drums here, but there's like loud crashes of cymbals. I really just got like flashbacks to Concert Band of just like crashing those cymbals in the percussion section, kind of with some timpani intermingled in with the horns. So all of that was really cool. I really like this original song. Ro's version, you get these string pulls or bends on the guitar in the beginning. Those like wow, wow, like that was a really cool addition to the song that really kind of made my ears perk up. There's much more of a sinking feeling though here, where I feel like you're going down, not going back and forth, floating downwards. So it's just a straight drop, not like a, back and forth. Then the track kind of moves to like a really super heavy breakdown with some really like nerve-wracking sounds in the background. I didn't know if those were like keyboards or what those were, but like
guitars with a ton of reverb.
That's what I knew. It was something different that just made it sound like really kind of creepy in a way. All of that kind of leads up to this like fake ending that kind of sets up like these sound effects to move into the next song, which I think you said was Venom.
Yep.
Yeah. So I love the combination of tracks there where like songs can lead into each other, especially like when you're listening to something from an album. The best example I can give is Meshuggah. They have an album called
Catch 33?
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
I know what you're talking about.
Catch 33. So Catch 33, their album, if you listen to the entire album off of an actual CD, if you listen to it in a car, for example, it's terrible because it doesn't immediately go to the next track. The songs don't roll into one another, whereas if you listen on a CD, like on a boombox or something, all the songs roll into one another, so it sounds like one continuously long song for like at least the first half of the album before things start to change and morph and get a little bit different. And so I love when bands do that, especially in concept albums where like you don't know what song is next. You just are listening to an entire experience, not like, oh, this is track 1, this is track 2, that sort of thing. So it's really cool.
No, I'm glad you like that part. That's one of my favorite parts of the progressive genre. And this album didn't get to do that very often. So yeah, the few times I did, it was going to be too much work is most of the reason. But also a lot of the songs are so similar. I was like, it's not really transporting except for things like the boss to Venom. My last album with Undertale is, like you said, every song connects. It's one straight listen, but the genres of the songs can vary. But yeah, Boss Battle 3, I found it really interesting and obviously very flattering that you picked this one because it's definitely not one that comes up on the radars of cover artists I've found. And in general, like it was paired with maybe some of the less exciting bosses for me, but I like that you describe it as like the sinking feeling. It is one of the last times you hear a short little boss battle on the album, let alone in the game. So it's kind of like, okay, your last ditch effort to get to Andros is here, and it's not like an evil boss fight, but it is, it's got like some challenges in there. And with the string section, I did like this little clean guitar transition as a sync because I thought it would be a cool way to transition back to the rock. But then if you're familiar with the Nirvana song Aneurysm, the part that's like I basically wanted it to be like a Nirvana song where it's just exciting chorus that's just noise and kind of energy there, and then flip back and forth. But I think, as you pointed out, like the guitar solo was important to me because when people walk away, I don't want them to be like, wow, that was a good Star Fox album alone. I want people to feel like the guitar playing, which is hopefully the point I'm kind of like pushing for. I want people to be like, wow, that was a really great guitar album, or or my style album. And to throw in the breakdown at the end is just like, again, another way I'm like, all right, let's just throw down. Like, this is a boss fight. So I think that one was, it's like an 8-string song. So you have like this low brooding G string thing going like, brr, brr, and sometimes like that kind of silliness is what makes metal fun.
True. Yeah.
I mean, of all the boss battles, it's the one that I knew the least, so maybe that's also why I diverted it the most.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Makes sense. So now's the time of the episode where we like to pick our favorite tracks, our favorite songs. We're going to pick originals as well as Ro's versions, and they may be different, they may be the same, but we usually let the guest go first. So Ro, tell us which one of the original songs that you like the best out of the ones we've chosen, and then which one of your songs that you like the best.
All right, of the ones we've listened to today, I'll go with Zonus, at least for today, because the original is still just sparkly, it's synthy, it's smooth. I like it. And then which one of mine? I think Aquas. It definitely showcases a lot more of the music that I can do and write, so I'm really proud of that. The ones we didn't pick, I would actually say Andros Fight and Ultimate, because those also showcase really new skills. I used a lot of thump guitar technique that I've been working on. And there was some voice acting for Andros that I was also like really proud of. So like I think all of my picks are just like the creative-ish weird ones.
Fair.
But that's how it goes.
Cool.
How about you?
I would agree on Zonus for the originals. I really like that one. I made the comparisons to Gradius, which, as many people know, is my favorite. So that's up there. And then out of the Arwing Odyssey tracks, I think I'm going to go with Starwolf because I liked the difference between the original and the Arwing Odyssey version. And as I'd mentioned, I feel like Ro's version had teeth, as it were.
This is tough. I still think Starwolf is my favorite of the originals, mostly because of Smash Brothers, for sure. But I'm torn between Aquas and Zonus. I think I want to go with Aquas. I thought that was really cool. Very different. But yeah, Zonus is right behind it. It was a tough choice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before we head into the final bits here, I actually did have a question, kind of taking us all the way back to the beginning. In the intro, you had mentioned you were approached to do this album as opposed to this being something that you had done and then somebody wanted to produce or press into a vinyl. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you find that happens often, that you or people that do kind of these remix albums are approached to do a specific album? Because I feel like that's the first time I've heard of it. And I think that's really cool that someone said, like, hey, we want you to do this album. And here's the songs that we want. And like, this is what we're looking for. And it's not something that I feel like I've heard.
It's absolutely uncommon. only know of the Lame Genie band, of course.
Yes. Yeah, they're buddies of ours.
Same people. Yeah, and I mean, it's not impossible. I don't know if it's for everyone. It's a different kind of workflow, and you know, some people pour their hearts into their favorite game. Like, you know, in my case, I'm a humongous Zelda fan, so touching anything like that, it's a no-brainer. But yeah, it's pretty uncommon. I don't know if anyone else has done it in like the 10 plus years I've been around, but I do think it yields a different kind of result too. Like, if people are a little bit open about what games or soundtracks or things that they're working on, you know, they can focus in on the musicianship too. You know, if I hated Star Fox, I may not have done this. I love Star Fox. It's a fun game. I didn't play it all the time. I didn't own it as a kid. I played it for the first time at a friend's house and beat it in one sitting while everyone else talked behind me.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's a very interesting configuration of doing work. So
yeah, that is really cool. Like I said, I hadn't heard about it before, and when you said it earlier, it kind of like didn't click until a little bit later, and I was like, oh, I'll ask at some point. But yeah, no, that's all. I feel like that also has to feel pretty good to have someone approach you and say, hey, we like what you do. Do you want to do this thing?
Yeah, it was. But
Fair.
no, I appreciated it. I don't think there was like an obvious Star Fox 64 like cover artist where you're just like, that's the person we need on this because they clearly love this. Though respectfully, I think the person who's covered the most Star Fox 64 besides myself that I'd listened to was my buddy Jack Fleegler at Toxic X Eternity. Awesome Star Fox covers. I mean, across like a humongous compendium of covers. So yeah, it's kind of neat that worked out that way.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we really appreciate you coming on our episode today to talk about Arwing Odyssey, your awesome concept / cover album for progressive metal for the original Star Fox 64 soundtrack. Where can we find you on the web, and what is it that you got coming out or working on?
Sure, thank you. And again, this has been a blast getting just to talk about video game music and also just, you know, to hear really two great perspectives on what I did. You can find me on all socials like Twitter and Facebook, YouTube on Ro Panuganti, RoPanuganti, and of course on streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music. I make, you know, VFX addled big music videos on my YouTube channel as well. So there's 11 years worth of that. And in terms of stuff coming out for this year, I say this at the beginning of every year where I'm taking a step back from some of my smaller, quicker, kind of crazy things to work on projects. So the two main ones that I'm excited to plug is my side project, Game Raga, which is a mix of Indian-influenced metal and rock, is going to hopefully release its first album. It's going to be called Sitarcraft, which is, yeah. Nice. I was given that pun, and I was like, I can't beat that.
Nailed it.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's a mix of covers that are being re-recorded or remixed in higher quality productions across the last few years, with a lot of them using sitar and tabla, and a lot of them just being metal bangers with like some Bollywood style music going on. And then I can't say the other one exactly, but I'm remaking a project with a ton of really good guests in time for the game I'm most excited for this year. And I feel like that's as obvious as it gets. So super excited. There's going to be some really good video game music guests. I actually have one guest from a really good metal band, not video game, that I'm excited about. And of course, besides that, you'll catch me doing covers and stuff in general. I'm working on something for March Caprice, which is a big online Kingdom Hearts event. And I'm producing full-time for my wife, Allison Martin. So everything she records and does magical things to, I'm going to get to produce as well. And I'll probably play guitar for a lot of that. So that's my 2023. I'm excited.
Nice.
Sounds busy.
Sounds like you're going to have a good year.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's always busy.
Fair.
So we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Cam Worma, Jordan and Anson Davis, Rage Cage, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Chris Myers, Scott Brackett, Brad Austin, Chris Murray, Llama Adam, Marcus Stewart, Nick Davis, and Ryan McPherson.
If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/xvgmradio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you at the end of the show and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
If you've liked what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on iTunes.
You can join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at facebook.com/groups/xvgmradio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks or just talking about the podcast itself.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both of those sites is @xvgmradio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links will be in the show notes.
All right, Justin, in 1 month, we've got a lot going on. So what are we going to be doing in the coming weeks/months?
Yeah, so let's start by finishing out the month of February. So in 2 days from when this episode comes out, this episode's coming out on the 15th. So on the 17th, we have our Patreon live show. If you want to listen live, it's 8 p.m. Fridays. This Friday, the 17th, we're going to be talking about cats versus dogs, mass hysteria.
Yep. I'm going to pick tracks for dogs, and Justin's going to pick tracks for cats.
Yes.
Cat or dog related VGM. So tune in to that. And then on the 28th, we're going to be doing our XVGM After Dark series, which is where we play video game music vinyls for you live on Justin's Twitch page. So if you're into that, we're going to be playing Golden Axe 1 and 2, and that should be awesome. Those have really good soundtracks, so tune into that. And then next month, in March, what is going to be coming out? Episode 99.
99, yeah.
99. We are so close to episode 100. I could taste it right on my lips.
Yeah. So before our big episode 100, we are going to be starting on a musical journey. We're going to be talking about the musical history of Natsume, and this is going to be part 1 of a series, and it's going to be broken up over the course of the year, I think. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do this yet, but this is going to be, there's too much history here, so we're going to be spreading this out.
Yeah, it's either going to be a 3 or 4 part journey breaking down the musical history of the Natsume development/publishing company, and tons of great music and lots of stories and really amazing games. So this is one I've been wanting to tackle since we started XVGM, so I'm glad we're at least going to start tackling it here. As to whether or not we'll finish it by the end of the year, who knows? Hopefully, but if not, then maybe we'll continue it throughout next year. But yeah, we're going to be continuing the episodes as we go on over the coming months.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a bit of a deep dive, but there's a lot of great music in there. So don't just think this is going to be some stodgy talking all about music. There's going to be some real bangers that you're going to get to enjoy.
So much good music. Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll see you there for all of that great stuff. This is Mike.
And Justin.
Signing off for XVGM Radio. You're in the Star Fox tank, like the not the tank, the submarine. Yeah, not the landmaster, not that. No,
Watermaster.
You're in the Watermaster, Stairmaster, and